The lie of perfection. Why humans need gods, not proof. What if I told you? The idea that humans are perfectly designed isn't a scientific conclusion. It's a psychological coping strategy. Because when you actually compare humans to life on Earth, we're not the top of biology. We're fragile. We break easily. We don't regenerate. Our senses are limited. Our minds are biased. So why do we still insist we're perfect? Because believing in perfection, somewhere, makes our imperfection easier to live with. Now let's dismantle this slowly and honestly. Before we ask whether humans are perfectly designed, we need to pause. Not at biology, not at religion, not even at evolution, but at something far more basic. How do we even recognize perfection? The word sounds simple, comforting, final. But when you listen carefully, perfect is one of the most misleading ideas we use. Because perfection is not something we see directly. It's something we infer. And inference always requires comparison. So, let me ask you this. If there is only one option, no alternative, no variation, no contrast, what does perfect even mean? There's nothing to measure against, nothing to evaluate, nothing to say could have been different. Without alternatives, perfection isn't discovered. It's assumed. And assumptions feel convincing precisely because they're never tested. To call anything perfect quietly assumes three things. First, that multiple possibilities exist. Second, that those possibilities can be compared. And third, that one outcome is clearly superior. If even one of these is missing, perfection stops being a conclusion. It becomes a declaration. A system that has never been compared is not perfect. It is simply unchallenged. Now notice something important. We only talk about perfection after we encounter imperfection. We know something can be improved because it fails, varies, changes, or because something else performs better. If nothing ever failed, the idea of improvement would never arise. And without improvement, perfection has no meaning at all. This makes sense in engineered systems. When humans build things, we design deliberately. We study how a system works. We imagine alternatives. We test variations. We compare results. We iterate. Improvement is intentional because we understand the system, we can explore options, and we can choose goals. In this context, perfection is at least conceivable. But living systems do not evolve this way. Life is not an engineering project. There is no blueprint, no predefined goal, no designer choosing the best option, no creator logic deciding what should exist. What we call evolution is not intention, it is process. Evolution does not choose. It does not ask, could this be better? It does not ask, is this optimal? It does not ask, should this be improved? It simply allows variation to happen and removes what cannot survive. Random changes arise. Most fail. A few persist. What remains is not what is best. It is what was not eliminated. And this difference matters. Survival is not endorsement. Persistence is not proof of perfection. Evolution also never starts over. Every new change is built on top of older ones. Every solution must work with existing structures. This creates a hierarchy. New traits adapt to old compromises, old flaws remain embedded, and entire branches of possibility disappear forever. Once a path is taken, many alternatives vanish. Not because they were worse, but because they were never explored. Natural selection doesn't compare all options. It removes them. Early, brutally, irreversibly. Species go extinct. Traits disappear. Possibilities vanish without record. The evolutionary record is not a catalog of optimal designs. It's a record of what survived under specific conditions. Now, here's where the illusion appears. Humans exist at the current tip of one evolutionary branch. That creates a powerful feeling that evolution was leading here, that this form was intended, that this is a final result. But evolution has no endpoint, no direction, no finish line. If conditions change, this branch changes or ends. What exists now exists temporarily. So how do we evaluate progress honestly? Only through comparison. When we compare across life, regeneration, resilience, senses, longevity, efficiency, adaptability, we don't see a single march toward perfection. We see trade-offs, specializations, contextual advantages. What survives isn't what's best overall. It's what's good enough, here and now. And once you compare humans to the rest of life, the myth of human biological superiority starts collapsing fast. Yes, humans imagine worlds that don't exist. We dream while asleep and speculate while awake. We invent language, build mathematics, and question our own existence. Surely that must mean something special. And it does. Just not in the way we're used to thinking. Because intelligence is not the same as biological superiority. Human intelligence is unusual, but it is also expensive, fragile, and narrow. Our brains consume enormous energy. They overheat, misfire, hallucinate, and degrade. A tiny clot, a small chemical imbalance, a minor injury, and personality can change. Memory can disappear. Identity can dissolve. That's not robustness. That's vulnerability. Biological excellence usually looks like efficiency and resilience. Human cognition looks more like a high-risk experiment that happened to succeed culturally. And nature, quietly, shows us better solutions all the time. Consider regeneration. Some organisms treat injury not as tragedy, but as inconvenience. The axolotl can regenerate entire limbs, bones, muscles, nerves, blood vessels, perfectly and without scars. It can regenerate parts of the spinal cord, heart tissue, even the brain. Humans don't regenerate. We cope. Planarian flatworms can regenerate their entire bodies from tiny fragments. Under the right conditions, they reset aging. Hydra show negligible senescence, continuous renewal, potentially immortal unless destroyed externally. Humans begin biological decline surprisingly early, often in our 20s. Or take resilience. Tardigrades survive the vacuum of space, extreme radiation, near absolute zero, complete dehydration, shutting down for years and returning to life. Humans can't survive minutes without oxygen. Or take senses. The mantis shrimp has up to 16 photoreceptor types. It sees ultraviolet and polarization, dimensions of reality we can't even access. Humans have 3. Eagles see up to 8 times sharper than humans, spotting prey from kilometers away. We rely on glass, plastic, surgery. Or take intelligence itself. Octopuses have neurons distributed throughout their arms. Independent problem-solving, tool use, instant camouflage, and limb regeneration. Human intelligence is centralized and brittle. One stroke can erase decades of memory. Or take navigation in darkness. Bats use echolocation to map the world with extreme precision. Sharks sense electrical fields from muscle contractions and nervous systems, signals humans are blind to, and some show remarkable cancer resistance. Or take cooperation. Ants operate as a distributed superorganism, carrying loads many times their body weight and coordinating complex tasks without centralized control. Elephants communicate using infrasound across tens of kilometers, showing memory, mourning, empathy, long-term bonds. Or Take optimization. Cheetahs are built for speed. Some frogs breathe through their skin, some freeze solid and revive later. Birds are born into flight with hollow bones, hyper-efficient lungs, magnetic navigation. Starfish regrow arms. Some regrow entire bodies from a single limb. So if biological perfection were real, it would be obvious, consistent, self-evident. But what we see is distributed perfection, specialized solutions, trade-offs, contextual advantages, not one supreme creature. Humans are not biologically exceptional overall. We are fragile, sensory limited, regeneration poor, environmentally dependent. What makes us unusual is compensatory cognition. We survive through tools, systems, stories, because our biology isn't enough. Now we move to something more uncomfortable. Because even if someone insists on a creator, intention, or higher design, there is still one question that refuses to go away. Why does the human body contain flaws that serve no benefit, cause suffering, and require constant correction? A perfect design does not merely function. It functions cleanly, and the human body does not. The immune system is meant to protect, yet often turns inward. Allergies, autoimmune disease, sepsis, where the defense becomes fatal. A system that misidentifies self as enemy is not optimized. It's poorly regulated. The spine is repurposed, not engineered from scratch. Adapted from quadrupedal structure into bipedal posture, creating chronic back pain, disc herniation, nerve compression, posture degeneration. Compromise, not elegance. Childbirth becomes a dangerous bottleneck. Narrow pelvis for upright walking collides with large skull for brain size. Historically high maternal and infant mortality. Long, helpless infancy. A perfect design wouldn't need surgery just to ensure survival. We carry obsolete parts that can harm us. Appendix, wisdom teeth, goosebumps, tailbone, historical leftovers. Our eyes are astonishing but wired backward. With a blind spot, the brain edits out. Compensation, not perfection. Pain systems often misfire into chronic pain, phantom pain, neuropathic pain, feedback loops that won't shut off. And the mind, our proudest tool, is unstable. Anxiety, depression, addiction, obsessive loops, hallucinations, suicidal ideation. Small chemistry shifts can collapse motivation, hope, identity. Even cognition itself is biased. We're optimized for quick threat detection, social alignment, comforting narratives, resulting in cognitive bias, superstition, tribal thinking, resistance to evidence. We mistake comfort for truth. And just to function normally, we require constant external correction. Glasses, braces, surgery, medication, therapy. Not enhancement, maintenance. Put all of this together, and the pattern becomes undeniable. This doesn't look like optimal engineering. It looks like iterative modification, historical layering, accumulated trade-offs, exactly what evolution produces. Now, here's where people try to rescue the idea of human exception again. They point to one thing: imagination. We imagine futures that don't exist. We revisit pasts that are gone. We construct gods, morals, meaning, worlds inside the mind. So it feels natural to say, surely this didn't arise by chance. But imagination feels divine for a reason that has nothing to do with perfection. At its core, imagination is not creation. It is prediction, untethered from the present. The survival simulator running without external input. When thought detaches from reality, it feels like transcendence. No gravity, no resistance, no immediate consequence. Thought moves faster than reality. But this is not divinity. It is decoupling. And here's a critical limitation of the human brain. It doesn't always label experiences as real versus imagined versus symbolic. It labels them as experienced. That's why dreams feel prophetic, why ideas feel given, why inspiration feels external, why beliefs feel revealed. Now combine this with another survival feature: agency detection. The brain is wired to ask, who did this, before what happened. Because missing an agent, like a predator, was fatal. Assuming danger when it was just wind was cheap. False positives were cheap. False negatives were fatal. So evolution favored minds that over-detect intention. Now imagine what happens when that agency-detecting brain meets imagination. Causes are invisible. Explanations are missing. But the mind still demands an agent, so it fills the gap. Invisible causes become invisible agents. Patterns become intentions. Thunder doesn't just happen. Someone causes it. Illness isn't random. Someone sends it. Fate isn't blind. Someone decides it. Gods emerge not because humans reason perfectly, but because humans cannot stop assigning intention. Once an agent exists, stories form naturally. Once stories form, belief stabilizes. And that mechanism isn't only religion. We see it everywhere. Bad luck, fate, the universe testing me, happened for a reason. Same structure, agency where none is required. Now we arrive at belief systems. Belief systems don't begin as lies. They begin as solutions. Solutions to fear, uncertainty, suffering, and not knowing. So the real question isn't, what do people believe? It's, what does belief do for the mind? Uncertainty feels like danger. So beliefs give closure, explanation, narrative, intention, because they reduce internal tension. Beliefs often feel true before they're examined because they stabilize us. Reasoning arrives later to defend what already feels settled. Randomness feels unbearable. So belief reshapes chance into purpose. Tests, lessons, destiny. And now the big correction. The idea of perfection is powerful because we are not perfect. Human fragility is hard to live inside. So belief creates an illusion of perfection. Not in us, but behind us. When the world is said to be perfect by design, our flaws stop being problems and become intentions. Pain gets a reason. Injustice becomes temporary. Chaos feels controlled. Not because it's true, but because it makes imperfection tolerable. So the illusion of perfection isn't the cause of belief. It's the product of belief. And once it takes hold, questioning becomes dangerous. Because if perfection collapses, imperfection is exposed again. Belief systems don't remove flaws, they reinterpret them. Fragility becomes humility. Suffering becomes purification. Limitation becomes God's will. Same reality, less discomfort. Authority stabilizes belief. Texts, traditions, institutions, elders, rules. Then doubt starts feeling like betrayal. Beliefs also channel imagination. Instead of, what else could be true? The mind asks, how does this fit the story? And belief feels deeper than evidence because evidence is external, belief is internal. Belief becomes identity, so questioning feels like losing meaning, not gaining truth. Now here's the release. What if imperfection isn't a failure, but the condition that makes meaning possible? A perfect system has no reason to change. No exploration, no questioning, no growth. Perfection is static. Curiosity is born from limitation. Creativity requires gaps. Learning requires error. Meaning requires uncertainty, risk, consequence, irreversibility. Ethics only exist where harm is possible and repair matters. Compassion matters because suffering is real. Responsibility matters because outcomes aren't guaranteed. Human intelligence isn't certainty. It's navigation, acting with incomplete information, revising beliefs, holding contradictions, moving without guarantees. Meaning doesn't need cosmic permission. It's constructed locally, temporarily, imperfectly. That doesn't make it fake. It makes it alive. And that brings us to the final step: living without cosmic guarantees. For most of human history, we assumed a guarantee beyond us. A plan, a watcher, a final explanation. Letting go is frightening because guarantees feel like safety. But safety and truth are not the same thing. Cosmic guarantees promise justice eventually, suffering with a reason, goodness rewarded, nothing truly lost. They soften anxiety, but they also shift responsibility away from us. If justice is cosmic, human justice feels optional. If suffering has purpose, preventing it feels less urgent. If everything is planned, choice feels less real. A universe without guarantees isn't hostile, it's neutral. Not judging, not testing, not waiting for failure, not against us, simply not for us. And when there is no cosmic backup, meaning moves closer. Care becomes local. Ethics become immediate. Responsibility becomes unavoidable. Without a pre-written script, life becomes genuinely open. Choices matter because outcomes aren't fixed. Love matters because nothing promises permanence. Kindness matters because it isn't enforced. Uncertainty feels heavier and truer. Some answers never come. Some losses are final. Fairness isn't automatic. But weight isn't falseness. Finite lives aren't smaller, they're sharper. Moments matter because they end. Relationships matter because they can break. Time matters because it runs out. And that's the final clarity. When the universe makes no promises, every act of care becomes voluntary. And that makes it meaningful, not because it's guaranteed, but because it's chosen. The religious claim and the quiet problem with it. Across cultures and centuries, many religions make a similar claim, that humans are a special creation, a deliberate design, the peak of intention. In the Bible, humans are created in the image of God. In the Quran, humans are described as the best of creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, human birth is presented as rare and spiritually privileged. Different traditions, different languages, same idea. That humans are not just another organism, but something intentionally set apart. And at first glance, that idea feels reassuring, because it turns fragility into purpose, limitation into meaning, suffering into design. But here's the question we rarely ask. Are these texts describing biological reality or psychological comfort? Because when we step outside Scripture and actually compare humans to life on Earth, we don't see biological perfection. We see bodies that break easily, minds that misfire, senses that miss most of reality, systems that require constant repair. If humans were the final, perfect creation, why do so many other organisms outperform us in regeneration, resilience, perception, and longevity? Why do salamanders regrow limbs while we scar? Why do birds navigate magnetically while we need instruments? Why do octopuses regenerate arms while we call it a miracle if we walk again? Religious texts don't describe these comparisons because they weren't written as biology textbooks. They were written by humans, for humans, to make sense of uncertainty. And that distinction matters, because calling humans perfect doesn't come from observing nature. It comes from needing reassurance, needing to believe that pain isn't random, that weakness isn't accidental, that existence has a guaranteed explanation. So the claim of perfection is not evidence of design. It's evidence of coping. That doesn't make religion evil. It makes it human. But once we confuse comfort with truth, we stop asking better questions. And the deeper truth is quieter, but stronger. Humans are not perfect creations. We are unfinished processes. Not the goal of evolution, just one temporary outcome. Not designed to be flawless, but shaped to survive long enough to ask questions. And maybe that's the real distinction. Not that humans are perfect, but that humans are aware enough to notice imperfection and still search for meaning anyway.